WCM do a very good job of separating content and form, and the web team is essentially, they're managing things like the layout design and the HTML, the CSS, all that kind of stuff. And that's great, but when you look at some of the bigger, larger sites, things like retail or retail sites, banking, etc., majority of the content comes from somewhere else, from different systems. And this is kind of where, things like Alfresco or maybe other repositories become critical. So we're currently aware of Liferay, Drupal. That's a very common sort of a connector between these two. But what we want to show you today is what we've done for Magnolia. Magnolia has been around for quite a while. They're actually similar kind of a stack to Alfresco. It's Java-based, JCR, ships with Tomcat. So the learning curve for us as developers on Alfresco side is actually it's more or less the same. And that's part of the reason why we selected Magnolia. In the current version of Magnolia, CMIS is also supported. This is current version 4.5, and latest version, which is just coming out now, also supports a responsive sort of design. So Magnolia is aware of through the request handler whether the requests are coming from iPads and different types of phone, and those kind of requests are managed automatically by Magnolia, and all you really need to do is define the appropriate templates, and content will be sort of rendered appropriately. Appropriate templates will be rendered. So, so what I'm going to show you basically is what is it that we needed to do on the Magnolia side and what we need to do on the Alfresco side in order to migrate content from one to the other. So on the Magnolia side, you basically go ahead and create your page hierarchy, you do your layout design, etc. And within Magnolia, every page has its own template. Templates are, again, free marker, the GSP. And as part of the page template, you define various placeholders for content. So I'll show you a demo of how that works. But essentially, you can either point and click to the repository for content within Magnolia to render various components of Magnolia content. So what we're essentially going to do, on the Alfresco side, is to be able to publish content to parts of that repository through CMIS and manage all that process within Alfresco. So content such as white papers, press releases, banner images, and large contents like that can be handled on the Alfresco side, whereas Magnolia just manages just the standard WCM type of content. So here's a quick snapshot of what the web page hierarchy looks like and what the repository or the resource kind of looks like. I don't know if you can see my mouse here. So on the website, for example, these are just a couple of sample websites. So here's a Tenthline website, pages, subpages, etc. And it's very easy, very intuitive actually in Magnolia to be able to create pages and subpages and so on and so forth. And for every page, you basically make a selection of the template. And templates are being put together by the developers. And as you begin to add content, you can basically double click on any one of these pages. It'll give you a preview and an edit mode. And you basically add content fairly, very simply. It's very, very intuitive. That's one of the things that we found about Magnolia. On another tab, on the document tab, essentially this is where you define where your documents are, where your images are. Again, it's a kind of a simple hierarchy, very easy to deal with. So what we're essentially going to do is, under resources, you'll notice there's like white papers and so on and so forth. So this is the content that we're going to be adding or that's required for this particular website. And we know the hierarchy or the paths to this type of content, and that's what we'll map back to Alfresco. So now the content authors can actually work in both environments, and the hierarchy looks exactly the same, but the processes are going to be different. So on the Alfresco side, what we needed to do essentially is create a new aspect. We're actually publishing content, so we need an indicator to say that content has been made active on Magnolia, or is it inactive. As you add content, by default it is inactive, so we had to create an aspect for, there's a Boolean for that. We also need to define the type. Are we adding a white paper or banner images or different types of content that's been defined as part of the data design. And then we activate the process through two workflows. So there's an activation workflow and a deactivation workflow. Magnolia Node ID essentially is required for, as content is actually published over to Magnolia, it returns an ID back so that next time we need to delete it or upgrade it, that's what it uses. But because it's also a Node ID, as the content moves over to Magnolia, you can actually move it around. It doesn't matter where it is in the hierarchy. Because we have the Node ID, we can actually update or delete the content. And as content is added within, on the Alfresco side, we just have a very quick rule which basically enables that aspect. Okay, so here's a quick example of, there's a content type, there's the activation, and there's the ID. So this is like three attributes for the aspect. And you'll notice here, we'll see in the demo that, so here's the, you'll see the red marker, the blue marker, meaning that this content has been already published over to Magnolia, and this content has just been added, going through its own workflow process, so on and so forth. But the aspect is automatically added to the document. So I'm just going to switch over to the demo very quickly. Resolution here, hang on. So, should I connect it again, maybe? Try this one more time. This thing? No, it's, I'll leave the resolution. Anyway, we'll just deal with this. Let me give you a quick example, show you how Magnolia works. You can tell actually here it's Tenthline.ca port 8071, and that's one VM, and we have another one at port 8092. So two servers kind of running in our labs. So we're going to log into Magnolia. And on the website tab, you've got the Tenthline site, you've got the various pages. There's a company page, there's a white paper page, news, etc., so on and so forth. But the content for all these pages may exist either under resources. So under resources, we've got Alfresco specific documents. Maybe there are white papers over here. So there's two white papers right now. What we're going to do is actually publish a couple of items directly to this repository, and then when we render the page, if you go back to the page and double click, let's say company page, this actually now shows me the page in preview as well as in the edit mode. So if I click on preview, this is exactly what the page will look like. There's the white papers, and right now there are actually two items in here. But the way Magnolia works is that every page has its own specific template, and within the templates there are various components that are defined that may be editable or not editable. So I can sort of click on any of these sort of green markers and I can add my own content, or there may be a small component, for example this one, where the code for that is pre-built. So it just basically goes to a certain portion of the repository and just renders everything that happens to be in there. So these two list items are actually coming from, if you go back to documents, resources, and there's the white paper, these two items here. All right. Okay. So what we're going to do is on Alfresco side, log in as admin. We have a site called Magnolia Content, and here's the document library. So there's the rule that actually adds the aspect to any document that gets that's dragged and dropped in here. So website content, we can create our own purely arbitrary hierarchy, but when you actually make the selection of what kind of content this is, that's how it ends up in the correct place on Magnolia's side. So I noticed that there's a couple of items in here. Green light, this basically means that this content is currently active. We can make it deactive. We can run there's two workflows, active and deactivate content. So this item is, I think you saw a screenshot of that. This has not been published. It's just currently going through its process. So we could, let's say, I'm going to drag and drop actually. Let's do this. Go to white papers and 2013. There we go. And oops, what happened there? So here's a PDF document. I'm just going to drag and drop that here. So it's sbips-pw. Okay, add that. There's a document, and the aspect is enabled automatically. We can actually take a look at what type of a document this is. We can actually tag it appropriately as well, but hang on. Edit properties. Okay. So we select white papers. You notice the remote ID is actually, it's there, but it's read-only. I mean, this is, it only becomes active when content has been published and populated at that time. Okay, we just do save. So currently document is actually not active. So we save that. And we can now start up a workflow process. So there's sbips, and there's my start workflow. So there's a two workflow, Magnolia activation. Select my assignee, let's say Jeff. Okay. And I essentially, so I can add as many documents here. During the, through the CMIS, when the CMIS process kicks in, it actually looks through how many documents been added to the workflow and it streams them one by one. So we start the process, okay. Start the workflow. And, okay, and I need to log out and log back in as Jeff. Here's document submitted for activation, and it goes through its whole normal kind of a process, approval. Yeah, go back to admin again. And you guys are following, right? Okay. And I've finished my task. So when I actually do task finish, there's a Java class that kicks in. This opens up the connection over to the Magnolia portion. It starts streaming the documents, look through how many documents there are. It also changes the activation flag and also gets the remote ID back into the document. So task done. So currently it's actually going through that process of opening up CMIS connection. It's actually a little bit slow. I don't know if you guys found the same thing, but the current implementation, it takes a while to open up the document. So it's like 8 seconds or so. So now we can go back to my document and white papers. There we go. And so it's not turned to green, so now we know that it's been published over. Let's look at the properties again very quickly. And there's the node ID that lives in Magnolia. We go to Magnolia side, refresh my page. Oh, yeah. Okay. Documents, resources, white papers. There's my sbips document. All I need to now do essentially is do a preview of that page, and it's already there. So this has gone through its own whatever complex process this way. So this is just one example. So almost any content can now be actually managed within Alfresco. And on the Magnolia side, people are just basically changing out the layout rules, etc. Okay. Do you guys want to see the code? Yeah. So. Okay, so on the aspects, essentially, so So here this defines actually the model. In the model itself, we actually identify how many types of content we need, whether it's white paper, so on and so forth. This could be a dynamic list, but in this case, we knew what the website needed essentially, and we should added it sort of appropriately. There's the activation, the aspects for activation, deactivation, Boolean type of document, and the remote ID. Okay, a couple of workflows, very simple. And here's the actual, where the magic happens. This is the one Java class for adding, one for removing. And it uses CMIS Apache chemistry. Okay, so here we're actually trying to open up the connection. As you can tell, so it's 8071, that's the server. It gets the number of documents from the VPN package. And it just goes through the process and it figures out, okay, is there an aspect? If it's not, if it flips the flag from active to inactive, and begins to stream the document sort of in this portion of the code. That's about it. Yeah, there's a couple of other checks and balances that we need to do, but I mean, it's really very, very straightforward. But from a content author's point of view, it's very clear. You know, you've got a hierarchy on the Magnolia side, you've got the same hierarchy on the Alfresco side, and I think things are kind of very intuitive. Any questions? Yeah.
I had two, I guess.
Stop you for a moment. I'm sorry.
Sorry.
There we go. Thank you. Appreciate it.
Hey, I've had problems previously with WCM integrations in general when I deal with edits.
Mm-hmm.
So some customers have noticed like to be able to workflow edits as well as creation.
Mm-hmm.
So you showed activations there.
Yeah.
So you kind of see the scenario where you have a live bit of content
Mm-hmm.
and somebody wants to make an edit to it and not have that live on the live site until it's been approved. Is there any way you can kind of use CMIS in this Magnolia integration to help that happen?
So you're basically creating content and editing content on our Fresco side?
Yeah.
So you want to do basically instead of doing deactivation, you want to basically do an update essentially of the
Yes.
content on Magnolia side. So yeah, I mean it's CMS. We actually showed you two set of classes where you actually delete and you add, but you can also do an update. It basically delete and then add at the same time. So you can do this within the Java class. To do
So when you reactivate it, it essentially transfers it back over
Right.
CMIS.
That's right. Yeah.
I think the follow-up to that might be sort of like a preview. So if I want to see
Yeah.
something before I publish it, like intermediate,
Well,
is there like a staging kind
Yeah,
of?
it's so well. Alfresco itself has that staging, and that's what you're actually looking at in this window here. So this is the staging environment right now. So this is content is being added. Content either can be added directly in Magnolia, but it depends on the type of content. Things like white papers, they exist somewhere else. There's another team in the organization that manages that kind of content. And then there's web content, which is managed here. So when I'm actually doing a preview, this is actually in the staging environment. From here, it can get published over to another production server, et cetera, beyond this.
I see. So then the document is being published from Magnolia to production then.
That's
So it
right,
makes
yeah.
two pops.
So Magnolia, as a WCM, has its own 2, maybe 3 environments. There's development, et cetera. That's where But what we basically talk about here is that yes, there's a WCM team that's responsible for throwing CSS, JS, all this kind of stuff, and sprites and small images. But there's a whole bunch of other content that come from elsewhere in the organization. That's typically why we will integrate a WCM with Alfresco. Okay. Yeah.
That point, I guess, is where I'm interested. So
Right.
if I did want to do an integration where I saw some of the web content
Mm-hmm.
available in both systems,
Sure.
does the CMIS functionality in Magnolia let me integrate with web content?
Does it integrate with?
So if I wanted to replace, so say you had a page, and I wanted the textual content to
You
also
want it to be
appear in
able to-
Alfresco.
Yeah, sure, definitely. So basically, it's the rule that you've written in the template. So instead of, when we're publishing, PDFs and Word document, but you could be publishing snippets, HTML snippets, or even you could potentially manage anything as long as you've got the template and rule that knows how to deal with that content. So we could easily have, let's say in this document repository, There may be kind of a folder for HTML, CSS, and all that can be managed in Alfresco. It gets published here, and the template just kicks in, and it knows where those things are, and that's the rules in part of the template. Sure, yeah, I can totally do that.
Thank you.
Any other questions? I told you it's going to be brief. Cool. I think that's about it, actually.